Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Income is the Outcome, where we believe it's not how much you earn, it's how much you keep that matters. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is the founder and president of the Whistler Agency, Tim Whistler. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to be sharing about some important Medicare information, which of course can affect you very much so in your retirement. We want you to be prepared to navigate Medicare successfully. Tim, my friend, always a joy to be with you. How are you this week?
I'm good, Kristen. It's always great to be here with you as well.
Well, thank you. I know you've put together a fabulous show for our viewers at home. You know, the reality is just because you've hit that golden age of age 65 and you have Medicare now, doesn't mean that you are done paying for expenses. We're going to be unpacking some of these Medicare costs and how, unfortunately, inadvertently, a lot of people can make a decision in one area of their financial life that can then trigger some negative consequences and cause them to have to pay even more in Medicare than they would have otherwise. So we need to make folks aware of how they can minimize these Medicare surcharges.
That's exactly right, because this is what you call Medicare IRMAA. IRMAA is an acronym. It stands for Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. And without some improper, or maybe with some planning that maybe should happen ahead of time, or maybe just because of pure chance, default, it actually can increase our Medicare Part B, your medical benefits, and Part D, your prescription drug benefits, if your income is too high during those Medicare years. And
what we're going to get into all this, but it's interesting, a lot of folks make these decisions and then there's a 2-year look back, right? So that's the issue, is you could make a decision maybe when you're 63 and not know that that's going to make your Medicare go up when you hit 65 or at any point from that point forward.
That's exactly right. So it's one of the charts that we utilize in our practice when it comes to Medicare income planning, because just like Kristen said, your current Medicare premium amounts are based upon what your income was 2 years ago. So sometimes it's hard for people to think, it's hard for anybody to think that far ahead, really, for most anything, let alone financial planning. But it's just one of the things we have to be mindful of when it comes to those times of life when we're going to have Medicare, and we need Medicare Part A, Medicare Part B, Medicare Part D, and some type of Medicare supplement or advantage plan, and how it can possibly increase our premiums due to our income.
Or if you sell a house or you have an unexpected inheritance, that could jack it up as well, right?
Any kind of taxable event could trigger IRMAA.
Yeah. All right. Well, who does the IRMAA surcharge apply to?
So it really applies to a level of income, if you will. So for example, when we're looking at how you file your taxes, if you're single, as long as your income from 2 years ago, your modified adjusted gross income is $103,000 or less, you're okay. You're not going to pay any additional premiums for Medicare B or D. If you're married filing jointly, it's $206,000 or less, you're okay. So it doesn't apply to everybody.
Right.
But when it does apply, it can be an expensive and sometimes a surprise down the road. And therefore, that's why we're kind of here, just to kind of look at the big picture. We look at the assets that we have in hand, we look at the ages involved, and then we start talking about income. And as soon as we start triggering income, that also triggers taxable income, and sometimes that can impact your Medicare premiums by implementing IRMAA.
Right. And again, as we say at the beginning of every show, it's not how much you earn, it's how much you get to keep. A lot of folks are shocked then when their Medicare premiums shoot up because they had no idea that they were on track to trigger these IRMAA surcharges. So you mentioned the modified adjusted gross income. How do you say that for short? Do you say MAGI? How do you say the acronym?
MAGI is usually what I say, just so it's a little bit easier.
Right. Okay. So we're talking about modified adjusted gross income, your MAGI. What does that all include when they're factoring in, okay, are you going to go over this threshold or not?
It includes any taxable income, from investments, withdrawals, maybe from work, right? Then it includes taxable withdrawals. So you've got taxable income, taxable withdrawals. Any type of tax, activity, whether it's from work, investments, or a deferred account where you're taking income from that 401k or traditional IRA, that counts. Now, again, keep in mind that we might have a multitude of tax-deferred accounts, traditional IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. Anything that's classified with that tax-deferred status can create an IRMAA situation if we withdraw too much income and surpass those threshold levels, whether you're filing single or whether you're filing married, filing jointly.
Wow, so a lot goes into this, and I know we're going to get into the calculation and some more specifics throughout today's show, but I think it's important to highlight that It's rare to find a financial advisor such as Tim who offers the complete, comprehensive, holistic financial plan that includes Medicare. I know personally, I have worked and spoken with a lot of different financial advisors out there who don't even touch this Medicare conversation.
Right.
And yet you choose to. And usually when I ask them, why don't you talk about this with their clients, you know what they tell me?
What's that?
They say there's no money in it.
Wow.
It doesn't behoove me to have this conversation because I don't make anything off of it. To me, that is the antithesis of what it means to be a fiduciary, to have that legal and ethical obligation to always serve your client's best interests. Medicare is a huge expense in retirement. It has to be factored into the overall plan. So talk about why you're so passionate about it.
You know, it's interesting. I look back on my 20-year career. I've only been doing this for 20 years. You know, and I think back to when I first started. I was a captive agent with one particular insurance company. I was a captive agent, so I represented one company. Shortly thereafter, I was introduced to Medicare. Mm-hmm. And this particular captive agency said, because we don't market Medicare, you can go out and affiliate yourself with another firm if you want and offer Medicare. I'm like, why would I not do this? Because number one, when people turn 65 and they're retired and they don't have an employee health-sponsored plan any longer, they need a Medicare plan.
Everybody needs it, right?
That's exactly right. I'm like, well, this is a good thing to do. So I jumped into that. I started to learn the ropes, started to understand the difference between Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage plans. I was blessed to be able to present some educational workshops just to educate people. I called it Medicare 101. I was Switzerland. I was waving that neutral flag right down the middle.
Right.
Here's the pros and cons of a supplement. Here's the pros and cons of an Advantage plan.
But you were providing that necessary education that is so needed in this space.
That's what we were trying to do. And then we started to unpack it as the years went by. Now as we started to pick up more and more momentum of being retirement income planning focused. Now we started to apply that to every conversation that we have, because when they're on a Medicare plan and when they're taking income from those tax-deferred accounts, IRMAA might show up. And you know, if it shows up, that's okay. We want to plan for that. We don't want to be caught off guard.
Right.
And that's where the passion comes from, because you're right, it will implement and possibly affect, if you will,
your
sure. Medicare premiums. And we pay enough for Medicare as it is.
Right.
We pay enough for doctor visits as we can. We need doctors. We need good medical professionals. But at the same time, we have to understand, how does that health care, how is that Medicare plan going to affect my overall income and tax liability?
Exactly right, and that's why we were talking specifically on not triggering that income-related monthly adjustment amount. It's like a landmine that a lot of folks don't even know they're walking through.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things where we're just being mindful of the fact that it's there. It may not affect you, but we'll walk through that. And again, if you come in for that complimentary conversation and we provide you with that written plan, we'll talk about it. And I'll let you know, hey, if there's something lingering down the road, we'll be sure to address it. Or also we can let you know and say, nope, you're fine. IRMAA will not show up in your current plan.
Wonderful. Well, Tim, I know we've got a lot more to get to, but thank you so much. And to our viewers at home, we know that Medicare is something that a lot of folks have questions about. There can be a lot of confusion surrounding it. Maybe this whole talk of triggering that income-related monthly adjustment amount is new to you, and you want to make sure that you don't inadvertently create greater tax consequences for yourself. This is why Tim and the team of the Whistler Agency would love to be able to meet with you. Again, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how they can help you and how they can build that complimentary written financial plan for you. To claim yours, all you need to do is call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-992-7829. Or if you'd rather connect online, we've got you covered. If you simply pull out your smartphone, you can open up that camera app, just point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more to cover on how you can make sure you avoid triggering these IRMAA surcharges right after this.
The way I view this, numbers are amoral. It's the people behind the numbers that I like to learn about. What does retirement look like for them? What are they going to do with these numbers? How long do they think these numbers need to last them? You know, what type of legacy plan do they want to leave for their kids and their grandkids? That's kind of that first dynamic of the conversation, is more just along the lines of, you know, getting acquainted and just kind of discovering what it is that we're working with. If they've ever sat through a timeshare presentation, this is completely the opposite. There is no sales pressure whatsoever, no obligation, there's no risk involved. It's just a simple 1-hour conversation. I think a successful retirement is all about having a plan, because if you think about the unfortunate situations where professional athletes go bankrupt just a few years after they end their professional career, these people have earned tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars, and then they're bankrupt. I just firmly believe that happened because there was no plan. not only just for the immediate, but also kind of for the foreseeable future. And we can always reflect back on that plan and make sure we're on the right track. Do you own an annuity? Are you aware of what type of annuity you own? For years, annuities have been a cornerstone of retirement planning, but they're not all created equal, and your current annuity might not be serving your retirement goals. With rising interest rates, that could mean better guarantees and better benefits for you. In short, potentially more income. Is your annuity up to date? See if your old annuity measures up. Call now for your complimentary annuity review.
Well, welcome back to Income is the Outcome. I'm Kristen Oakley here with Tim Whistler. He is the founder and president of the Whistler Agency. And as we've talked about already on today's show, one of the things that really sets Tim apart is his depth of understanding regarding Medicare and what it means for you. And unlike a lot of wealth advisors out there that don't even touch this conversation, you go deep in the weeds with it for folks, because you and I both know it's an integral part of having a comprehensive, holistic financial plan, and so much can go wrong if it's not factored into the equation.
That's exactly right. It will play a role for some clients. And I remember specifically having a Zoom conversation with a gentleman from South Carolina. You know, when COVID shut everything down and we went virtual for a little while, instead of doing in-person conversations like this, we were doing it through the Zoom camera, which was a little bit different. I didn't really care for it, but it is what it is.
Right, you like meeting in person with folks, but it's nice to have it if we need it, right?
And I remember one specific conversation, especially when it comes to IRMAA, of this gentleman who wanted to have a pretty aggressive Roth conversion strategy with his current advisor. They walked through it, they looked at the tax liability portion of it, and started having that conversation and started implementing that plan. Guess what happened 2 years later when he got his Medicare bill? He was livid, and rightfully so. His advisor had no clue that even such a thing like IRMAA even existed, because that guy called back his advisor and said, look, we did some aggressive planning for my Roth conversions. We took care of the IRS's share, but completely forgot about Medicare's share.
Yeah, so if someone's just tuning in and joining us, explain why that happened. So they did the Roth conversions, which increased his taxable income for that year, which affected his Medicare premium payments 2 years later.
That's exactly right. So if you're just joining us, there is a threshold that Medicare sets as far as how much income you can earn per year to determine whether or not you have to pay an additional premium for your Medicare Part B, which is your medical coverage, or Part D, which is your prescription coverage. So if you're single and you're filing taxes, as long as you earn $103,000 or less, you're okay. If you're married, filing jointly, you're okay to earn up to $206,000 or less without that penalty. But if you start doing some aggressive conversions of Roth dollars, you know that you have got to pay taxes on those dollars to convert. Therefore, your taxable income just went up. And just like that gentleman from South Carolina, he was kicked into some higher thresholds and had to pay more premiums for Medicare for that entire calendar year.
So I know you said he was livid. Do you remember how much more he was getting charged?
It was hundreds.
It was.
We're going to talk about that here in a second, but the break point goes down. It's not a progressive like your tax brackets are. This is just threshold. As soon as if you spill over by 1 penny, you're in that bracket and you will pay that fee.
Yeah, man, I would be livid too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He should have been.
Right, but again, this is the problem, right? A lot of the industry doesn't even look at this element. But again, how you make a decision in one area of your financial life can and will affect all the others. That's why you can't afford to look at any of these pieces in a silo. You have to see how they fit together. So, okay, you mentioned that the government determines if someone is going to reach those IRMAA thresholds based on their modified adjusted gross income from this year or from 2 years ago.
Right.
Do tax deductions help with IRMAA at all?
You know, most deductions won't help because of the fact that when you look at your gross income, right, from all the tax deferred accounts, then what do you get with that? You get a deduction, right? So that deduction reduces your gross income, and then now you come down to MAGI, the modified adjusted gross income. So the deduction's already baked in. So therefore, we have to be mindful of the fact of, okay, we've got income coming in from tax deferred IRA accounts, 401k accounts. We've got some pension dollars coming in. We've got Social Security dollars coming in. All those are counted towards MAGI. And then again, if we take it one step further to do some tax efficient planning by trying to reduce that big picture liability, which is a good conversation to have. Don't get me wrong, we don't want to avoid it.
Right.
But we want to plan for that.
Yes.
Because if we spill over from one threshold to the next, we will pay more for our Medicare premiums for that entire calendar year that applies to that conversion to those withdrawals.
And again, it goes back to what you did 2 years prior.
Yep, 2 years.
Which is sneaky, right? I mean, it's very sneaky.
That's right. Wait a second, I can't remember what I did last week, let alone 2 years ago. But the IRS won't forget.
And so for this gentleman who inadvertently had done the Roth conversions, they looked at his income from 2 years prior, jacked up his Medicare payment. That just lasted for 1 year, and then does it go back down?
Yes, it lasts for, so IRMAA lasts for 1 year, right? So they look back, so, for example, in 2024, they're looking back to 2022 numbers.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
So again, as we kind of break down, the thresholds, those additional premiums are only impacting the premiums for that calendar year. Then you flip the calendar to the new year, and everything resets, because now in 2025, they're going to be looking back at 2023. It's exactly right. So it's not the end of the world.
Right.
But it's a surprise that we probably can potentially avoid with a little bit of planning.
That's what I was going to say, is that it's often unnecessary. Like
Absolutely.
folks, I've heard horror stories where people all of a sudden they get their Medicare statements in the mail and they're like, wait, what? Why am I paying more? I had no idea. And it's because of the decisions that they had made 2 years prior, which to your point is why you have to plan for these things.
Absolutely.
What other life events can inadvertently trigger IRMAA that folks aren't necessarily aware of?
One of the most difficult conversations that I have with folks is finding out that a spouse has passed. You develop relationships with people. And I think specifically right now that the gentleman who comes to mind is Mike. I met Mike and Pam years ago. Started that conversation together, unfolded the details, went through the plan, put the plan in place, and all of a sudden one day I get a phone call. And Pam was taken tragically in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
And it tears your heart out when you hear that, because you're part of their lives, they become a part of our lives, and you just become emotionally attached to folks like that.
Well, you're doing life with them in such a powerful way,
Exactly. So, when the death of a spouse occurs, obviously that's one emotion to get through. There's very little room emotionally and physically for any type of planning. So my point is, when we're talking about IRMAA and how it can possibly impact us down the road, think about, for example, husband and wife together drawing $150,000 a year in income. I'm just using a round number, because $150,000 is well under that threshold of IRMAA, which is $206,000. But let's say now there's a death. Spouse passes away. What do they have to file as next year? They now have to file as a single. If you're making $150,000 in income and you're single, you're well over the threshold of $103,000. Here comes IRMAA knocking at your door. So again, it's not the conversation to have at that time when a loss occurs, because again, that's not the time. The emotional reaction, the grief, trying to figure out how we're going to go through life all by ourselves because we just lost our husband or our wife. But if we can have the conversation ahead of time, that way then we can say, okay, just be mindful that IRMAA may show up at some point down the road. That's okay, because we had the plan, we have the conversation. It's one less thing that maybe catches us by surprise.
Right, yep.
But ahead of time, we might even be able to do some planning ahead of time as well. So.
Yeah, I have no doubt that a lot of folks watching are going, hey, I already work with a financial advisor and I've never heard half of the things that they're hearing now on the show today. So if someone just wants a second opinion to come in and to sit down and look at how all these pieces fit together for them, would that be something you'd be willing to do? Absolutely.
Let's have that conversation. You've got the phone number there on your screen, you've got the QR code. Folks can reach out at their convenience. We'll find a time to meet. I'm often asked, Tim, when are your business hours? Whenever you're available. I've had conversations as early as 7 o'clock in the morning. I've had conversations as late as 7:30 at night. It's okay. Pick up the phone, call the phone number, scan the QR code. Let's have the get acquainted conversation. That's simply where you bring in some statements, you bring in policies, you bring in account values that you currently have, and we start unpacking the conversation. And again, keep in mind, we're not going to solve everything in 1 or 2 conversations. We simply set the foundation for continuous conversations and we build on it. We go at a very comfortable pace. You hold the baton. I'm going to follow your lead. So we want to absorb this information at the pace you set, and we'll meet on a regular consistent basis and start unpacking not only what's top of mind for your concerns, but also what we know what might be lingering down the road for you in retirement.
Tim, I am repeatedly reminded of what a beautiful thing it is that you bring such care and such compassion and such knowledge to the table of walking your clients through each and every one of these scenarios. And as we shared, we don't know what's going to happen. It's so important to have a plan in place, though, and be prepared for the unexpected, like that story that Tim shared, you can get in the front of this. You can make sure that you are setting yourself up for the best situation possible so that you don't inadvertently trigger negative consequences throughout the rest of your full financial plan. So if these are not the kinds of conversations that your current advisor is having with you, we encourage you to get a second opinion. And you can't get a second opinion from the same person who gave you the first. So Tim and the team would love to be able to provide that for you. Again, it's completely complimentary. Just call 888-992-7829, or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We'll be back with more on today's conversation here on Income is the Outcome right after this.
So we're based out of Peoria, Illinois. I literally just opened this office literally about a month ago, because the last 6 years I've been working out of my home office. And that was for just family reasons. My wife and I have 2 sons, and they're now starting to get to that age where they're about ready to fly the coop. So it's just good to be with them for these last few years. We are on the main level of a 3-story professional office building. So as soon as they enter through the large double doors, they immediately turn to their left, and there's the entrance to the Whistler agency. So we're very easily accessible for people, right off the street. You park in the parking lot, walk the sidewalk, you come in the door, and you're right there. And when they come in, there'll be a couple little seats there in the small little entryway, if you will. Most people aren't really waiting to get to me. I'm not like a doctor's office or anything like that. But then we've got a little receptionist area, and then I walk them through our conference room. The conference room table is actually a dining room table for my grandmother. I just bring a little bit of the element of family in my practice, and just kind of have our conversation right there. When interest rates are low, you might be able to refinance your home, your car, and even your credit cards. Yet when interest rates go up, it may make sense to refinance your retirement. Higher interest rates could provide income opportunities you may not be aware of. What works for your portfolio during low interest rates may not work for you when interest rates are high. Call today for your complimentary Refi Your Retirement review.
Welcome back to Income is the Outcome, where today Tim and I are discussing how to minimize Medicare surcharges. Again, it's something that a lot of folks are unaware of. We don't want you to be hit with a higher Medicare bill, rather, or medical bills, right? But higher Medicare premiums than you otherwise would have to pay. And with the proper planning in place, you can help to minimize those surcharges and be proactive about it. You share that story of the gentleman who was doing Roth conversions, which inadvertently triggered IRMAA, that income-related monthly adjustment amount, and then he was hit with a high bill 2 years later, was not happy about it.
Right.
For folks who are just tuning in and joining us, obviously Roth conversions, as you said, are an important thing for a lot of folks to consider. So why don't we just explain why that is? And then my follow-up question is, given the conversation we're having today about IRMAA, when is the best time to do these Roth conversions?
That's a great question. One of the things that we talk about is 59 and a half. That's a very magical age because it opens up the window for us to start exploring things like this, like a Roth conversion, which again, a Roth conversion allows you to take dollars that are currently residing in what I call that forever taxed bucket, known as a tax deferred account, like a traditional 401k, traditional IRA, pay the taxes on the amount you want to convert to the Roth. And then once those dollars sit in that Roth IRA, those dollars will never be taxed again. Because when it comes to IRMAA, dollars that can trigger IRMAA are taxable dollars. Roth IRA dollars are tax-free dollars. That's a fun place to be. So we can be a little bit more proactive. Now, does that mean that we're going to be able to avoid IRMAA every single time? No. But what we can avoid is a surprise. And unlike that gentleman in South Carolina working with that other advisor who had no clue IRMAA even existed, that was not a fun day for them. No. Obviously, we don't want to pay more for Medicare than we need to, but if we want to maybe try to reduce that overall tax liability and maybe reduce overall that IRMAA can impact year after year, it's like Ed Slott says, do you want to be kind of irritated, for decades or irritated for a couple of years? And that's what we can kind of talk about when we start to explore a Roth conversion. Let's have that conversation right around 59 and a half and after. Because even though we might be 62, 63, 64, we know Medicare's coming. We're on that threshold of Medicare. It's okay for us to talk about how Roth conversions may impact IRMAA, but again, at least it's planned and at least it's not a surprise.
Yes, for sure. And that's the key. I think it's never fun when you have a bad surprise, right? We like good surprises, but not bad ones. And IRMAA can be a bad surprise for a lot of folks. What are some of the other strategies that you're able to employ for folks to help them minimize these Medicare surcharges?
You know, I brought a list with me because it's ones that, you know, kind of vary from household to household. Like, for example, let's say, you know, we talk a lot about tax deferred accounts.
Yes.
Let's talk about basically a jointly owned account, or basically a taxable brokerage account.
Okay, which a lot of folks have.
Exactly. Yep. So, for example, we think that we might have IRMAA coming down the road. So, for example, we can utilize what we call tax gain harvesting. So, for example, you know, if consider selling those shares before you retire. So that way you can pay the gains now, right? You pay the taxes on that, so that's taxable income. Then what you can do is just buy the shares again. And what you've just done, you just reset the cost basis. So that way, as those shares accumulate down the road, your cost basis is higher. So therefore, when you sell them, you won't have as much of a taxable event, and that can help maybe avoid IRMAA, okay? Another one is Social Security. A big conversation to have. You know, when should we turn on Social Security?
Oh, yes.
You know, 62, full retirement age, 60, you know, 67, 70, whatever the case is.
And Medicare's smack in the middle of that decade when you're trying to make that important decision, right?
Right in the middle of it all is Medicare and Social Security. They're almost like, you know, cousins, if you will. So we'll talk about that as well, because, you know, your Social Security income, up to 85% of it can be taxable, and it could trigger IRMAA as well. You know, if we do go into IRMAA, you do have a little bit of possible relief. You can actually file an appeal. So, for example, let's think through this for a second. Let's say you're going to retire and turn Medicare on at the same time at 65. Well, at 63, which is the income they use to determine your 65 premiums, you are in your highest working years, earning years. So therefore, you might pay IRMAA because it's based upon the income you earned 2 years ago. But you can file what they call an appeal. So you can ask for Medicare to maybe appeal that because you're no longer earning that type of income. That's another way to do it. And another thing too that I think is a good option for people, if you go to our website, www.thewhistleragency.com, and up at the very top, you'll see a menu of buttons. You can click on the podcast. We've been offering the podcast called License to Spend for about 4 years now. And I had the blessing of having a gentleman on there for 2 episodes where he talked about a home equity conversion mortgage. You know, Kristen, one of the most valuable assets that people have in retirement is the equity in their own home.
Yes, for sure.
And this gentleman was so gracious to share his time and his knowledge and his expertise to talk about how we can help clients extrapolate the value of that home equity into their plan. And because it comes out tax-free, guess who we might be able to avoid? We might be able to avoid IRMAA.
Right.
So there's a couple different ways we can tackle this if we think that IRMAA might be showing up somewhat down the road when it comes to Medicare.
Yes, and it's something to stay on top of every year because especially of that 2-year look back, right?
Yes.
We have to plan for that because they're going to look at your income from 2 years ago to see if it gets triggered. So Tim, thank you so much. This has been so insightful and valuable today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kristen. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited for more folks. I'm sure, no doubt, that raised more questions and concerns. And if that's you, if you want help navigating through all this, you don't have to go it alone. Tim and the team of the Whistler Agency would love to be able to help and serve you. So again, that number to call to claim your complimentary written financial plan, 888-992-7829. Or you're also welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on Income is the Outcome.